I just need to speak a little softer. How's everybody doing?
Okay. Good.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Pedro Ramos. I'm the acting superintendent of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It is really my pleasure to be welcoming you all today to the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Center here in Townsend, Tennessee. This is a very, very special day for all of us, not just at Great Smoky Mountains National Park or even Townsend, but Tennessee in general. This is an important day for the people of Tennessee, and let's not forget that a great deal of this park is also in North Carolina, so this day is also important to the people of North Carolina. It's great to see so many friends in the crowd, many of whom I have met, and many of whom I can't wait to spend some time with in the time that I have ahead of me before I have to go back to Florida, which is where I'm originally from. I'm normally the superintendent of Big Cypress National Preserve. Shortly after I got here, I will say that I quickly realized not just one thing, but a number of things. I'll share with you one of them, and it has to do with the care and the passion that I very, very rapidly understood people have for this national park, for your national park. It really is the community's national park here in North Carolina and in Tennessee. And that is reflected by the commitments that you all make every day to help us do the work that we do. We cannot do this work by ourselves. And we have a tremendous amount of partnerships. I have never seen anything like this anywhere else in the service, and I have been around to a lot of places in this great nation of ours, and I have seen a lot of communities working with other national parks, but honestly, nothing like this. We simply could not be doing the work that we do without your help, so I tip my hat off to you, and I say thank you. I would be here all morning and all day. You didn't come here to listen to me speak. You came here to listen to some other important people speak that we're honored to have with us today. But I will, and I can't list all of the partners, but I will mention a few. First of all, I want to acknowledge that we have folks from Senator Corker's office, Congressman Duncan's office, and Congressman Rowe's office. My Spanish tongue is getting in my way. We also have some partnerships that I think are important to recognize, simply because we're here at the site of our center, our collections preservation center that will be built immediately next door to this facility. And we're excited about it, and we could have not crossed the finish line with that project without the help of people like the Friends of the Smokies. And we have Mr. Jim Hart here with us. Jim and I went for a hike with the secretary yesterday at Chimney Tops, and him and I are both trying to recover. As the secretary who has climbed Mount Rainier 7 times, and the tallest mountain in Antarctica, moves on to the next thing very easily later this afternoon. Jim and your board, thank you very, very much for what you do. We also have the Great Smoky Mountains Association, Executive Director Terry Maddox. Terry, thank you so much for your friendship and for all the work that the association does for the park, and for your involvement in making this facility a reality. It's also an honor to have seen come through the door a little while ago the chief of the Cherokee Nation, Chief Hicks. Where are you? Chief, please stand up and be recognized. Chief, you honored me by welcoming to Cherokee Nation several weeks ago, and you welcomed me, and your council, your business council welcomed me, and I felt at home. And I thank you, and as I said to you that day at the council, you cannot separate the story of the Cherokee people from the story of these mountains. If we did, it would be a mistake, and we're not going to do that. And I'm glad that we're here together and that our partnership is strong. Thank you very much for being here. I also, last week, met somebody that used to be a fellow Floridian until he moved up here. I'm sure that on a day like today, he's probably thinking about Florida since he woke up this morning. And he came about 10 years ago to not only be part of the management of this wonderful facility, but also be part of the design and construction of this facility. He's been here from the beginning. And I want to thank him and his board for welcoming us here today. Hosting something like this is not easy, and it took a lot of effort, and everything came together because they were very flexible, and you're true friends. And with that, I'd like to thank Mr. Bob Patterson and his board for hosting us, for the partnership that we have, without whom also this facility that we're talking about today would not be possible. Bob, please join me up here for a minute.
Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm better without a mic. First of all, welcome. As everyone is going to say to you, please, we're glad to have you here. The Heritage Center, and I'll be very brief about this, the Heritage Center is all about partnerships. Just about everyone in this room is in an organization that works with the center. Two of the biggest ones, EBCI and the National Park. If it wasn't for those two organizations, the exhibits you see in this facility, the artifacts you see in this facility would not be here. And in fact, we wouldn't be here as an organization at all. But what this allows us to do is showcase the artifacts and talk about the cultural heritage, the rich heritage of this region. And that's what's so important. And many of you take part in that every year with us, and we appreciate all that you do. It's about the education. It's about our children. It's about the families. And every year, roughly 30,000 guests come through here, and they get to experience this, from working with Native American games like our blowguns and our atlatl, to working on open-hearted cooking, which we've got a school group today, right now, doing open-hearted cooking up in our Cardwell cabin, which came from Sevier County. We're not just Bluff County, by the way. So, anyway, thank you all. Thank you for including us in this wonderful endeavor. We're so excited because we were able to use the archives and the collections before we even opened our doors. So, thank you for the time. Thank you for including us.
Thank you, Bob. Those children making enough food for all of us? They know from the start that that's what they were doing? Okay, as I said a little bit earlier this morning, we had the privilege of introducing the Senator and the Secretary to our team back at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which in fact, I have to say is the highest caliber team that you find anywhere in the national park system nationally. The Secretary already warned me that I've been saying this a few times already. People, when I get back to Florida, they're going to start asking me questions. I'm going to have to have some explaining. But truly, a remarkable team of people, and we were honored that you shared some of your time with us this morning. The way that I put it to them was that we have two giants here with us today. In fact, I feel like a little bitty sapling standing up here next to these two giants, because that's what they are. These are people that are our greatest supporters of the work that we do to be not only good stewards, but responsible stewards of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And not just the water, the woods, and the critters, which is what sometimes we tend to pay a lot of attention to, and that's important. But equally important, and if not sometimes more important, protecting the story of the people that have had a connection with this place. And that's what we were doing a little while ago before we came in here, listening to some of those stories, because our job is not just to tell that story, but to continue providing those opportunities for people. Many of them here in the front row, but everybody else behind the front row, that will continue wanting to have that meaningful connection with this place. And that's our job. So it is an honor for me to introduce one of those two giants, He's the son of Tennessee, perhaps the favorite son of Tennessee. Somebody that I don't need to spend much time introducing, but it is my pleasure to thank him for all the work. Senator Lamar Alexander, thank you so much.
Pedro, thanks for your enthusiasm. We welcome you here, and we appreciate your love of this area as we love it ourselves. I'm really here today to say thank you to a few people, and let me just start with the lady I'm about to introduce, Sally Jewell. We haven't had a Secretary of the Interior who knew more about the Great Smoky Mountains coming in than Sally Jewell does. She can tell you about her visits here. I was unfortunately at the University of Tennessee basketball game yesterday. Couldn't climb the chimneys with her. I hear half the people who did are still recovering because she's climbed so many tall mountains. But she's not the only one who worked on this History and Archives Center. I mean, Dale Dickinson and many in this room nurtured and caressed it for a long time. The Friends of the Smokies, the Great Smoky Mountain Association. The board of the Heritage Center has been enormously generous in doing all this, but someone finally had to make the decision to do it, and Sally did it. So I want to give her credit for making the decision to make this possible, and she'll be announcing today the schedule for construction, which we'll let her do. But without her, we wouldn't be here today, and I'm deeply grateful to you, Secretary Jewell. Will be an exciting facility. A curatorial center sounds a little hard to understand. It's history, it's archives, but it's really a home for all the things that were in the homes of the people who lived here. And one of the reasons I think we all feel like we own the Smokies is because a lot of the families actually did. And that's why we have this possessive attitude about this national park of ours. Of course, the other reason is we gave it to the nation, unlike almost every other park, which was just carved out of federal land that the government already had. So for those two reasons, we have an unreasonable affection for our national park. And the opportunity to have properly cared for things like the quilts from the Walker sisters and Jim Thompson's photographs, and probably the largest collection of stills anywhere in the world. And all the things that might come. Dale Dickinson says that the things that might come in the future from families who know there now is an appropriate place to put it. This is going to be a great learning opportunity for us and for our children and our grandchildren and for the nation about the story of this park. So we're here to say thank you to almost everybody in the room, but especially to Sally Jewell. Now, let me present her to you. She's climbed Mount Rainier 7 times. She's climbed the tallest mountain in Antarctica. She climbed both peaks of the chimneys yesterday, so she's a fit secretary. You know that. But she's been a petroleum engineer. She's been a banker. She's been the chief executive officer of a recreation company that grew from $600 million to $2 billion in revenue under her leadership. So she pretty well knows what she's doing in every job she's been in, and she's off to a fast start in a brave new world, which is called the federal government. But I'm delighted that she made her decision, and she came here so early in her tenure to the most visited of all of her national parks. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Sally Jewell.
Thank you, Senator, for that warm introduction. And the Senator has shown me some amazing Tennessee hospitality here. But I have to say that the Tennessee hospitality that he's extended to me has been going on for years. Don Barger's here with the National Parks Conservation Association. I was on that board for 9 years before I took this job. And as I went and met with senators and representatives on Capitol Hill talking about the importance of places like Great Smoky Mountains National Park to the economies of the state of Tennessee and North Carolina and the communities around, Lamar Alexander was always a champion. We look forward to the National Park Centennial, 100 years of the National Park Service in 2016. I had hoped when I first started talking to members of Congress that we would be well on our way to actually taking care of the $11 billion maintenance backlog, but we aren't, so we're going to take care of the things that we need to do to make sure that these parks feel welcoming to everyone by 2016, and Senator Alexander has been a champion for that all the way along, and I just can't thank him enough for that leadership, but also for his wise counsel to me as I navigate my way through the confirmation process, as I navigate my way through the complexities of politics, and I feel like a babe in the woods. I can run a company, but navigating your ways through the political environment is a whole new world for me. So there are people that you can trust that will tell you how it is, that won't betray your confidences as you're sharing your strategies, and you've got one of them here in the great state of Tennessee, so thank you, Senator Alexander, for everything. This is a stakeholder meeting, and so that means it's an opportunity for us to have a dialogue together, those of us on stage and those of you in the audience. I'll say a few words, but what I'd really like to do is hear from you, just as I did a few minutes ago from the descendants of this area, whether it is our nation's first people, indigenous people, Eastern Band of the Cherokee, and Chief Hicks and I are going to meet a little bit later on this afternoon privately, but the people that roamed these lands before settlers also appreciated and valued the Smokies, and had a lot to do with recognizing the special nature of these lands and what they stood for. The settlers who were in Cades Cove and places like Little Greenbrier, who I just had a chance to meet in the front row here and over here, have, they say they're all cousins, which is probably true one way or another, some connection, but had a history that is very rich, that helps us understand how the Smokies were settled, how they were integrated into this new national park, some probably happily, some perhaps unhappily, and as we set aside huge lands in the west, we didn't have that opportunity in the east because it had all been parceled out, and so the Smokies and Shenandoah National Park, two examples here in the east that have become my place where I get energy to fuel myself for some of the harder days that come along, is to get out into the great outdoors close to home. And now close to home is Shenandoah, Catoctin, and will be the Smokies as well. These folks have in some ways given up their lands for the greater good for the United States, and I really, really appreciate all of you and your ancestors for doing that. I also appreciate Senator Alexander and others in this community for putting conservation easements on adjacent lands so that in this part of the region in Townsend and some of the surrounding hillsides, you won't see a development of homes and things like that. You'll have a character that really respects and honors the landscapes. So it takes a village, or multiple villages, and a few big cities thrown in like Knoxville, Asheville, to make a park like this. And that is what you're all about. You represent a variety of different communities. You represent interests that benefit economically from the park being here. I'm sure you represent groups that are interested in the natural world and the biodiversity that is so spectacular here in the park. You represent the friends of the Smokies, and Jim, I had a great time hiking with you yesterday, thank you, and learning about Trails Forever and the endowment for the trails in this particular park. I enjoyed spending time yesterday with Tobias, who's working on that incredibly spectacular trails project up to Chimney Tops, which is, we hiked on the part that was done over the last couple of years. We slogged through the mud on the part that hasn't been done. I took my boots off before I went back into the facility at the Park Service, and I took my boots off before I went into the Senator's residence. And he's done an incredibly beautiful job of restoring historic structures here himself, because you do have some pretty legendary mud. Being from the Pacific Northwest, I felt right at home. But friends of the Smokies, Great Smoky Mountains Association, Trails Forever. These are organizations that used to be provided the margin of excellence in our national parks. In this day and age, in some ways it's the margin of survival because budgets are really tight. And I know that budgets will continue to be tight, so I want to make sure that we're running the parks in the most efficient, effective way that we can, but we also help all of you understand the importance of the parks and supporting the federal budget of the parks in a way that we can do a job for you so that your communities can thrive because of their proximity to this park. And it's a joint effort. So you do a great job in this community of working closely together. And I really appreciate that. As Pedro said, and Pedro is coming from another national park and other parks within the national park system, and he says that what he sees here in terms of cooperative partnerships is like nothing he's seen around the country. And I think for the reasons Senator Alexander expressed, that's true. You all feel a deep connection to this place and a kindred spirit, and I think that's really important. I'll also say that I have come into the park on multiple occasions. I've probably been here half a dozen times, but first and most importantly in 1977 when my sister lived in Waynesville, and I spent a good chunk of the summer of 1977 with her, and I camped and I hiked throughout the park. Went down the Blue Ridge Parkway into Georgia. I went to folk festivals and bluegrass festivals around the area. Got a real taste of why this area is so special. Been back here with the National Park Second Century Commission, charting a future for the national parks in their next century, thinking about how do we make parks relevant when we have this whole new generation coming up, the millennial generation and those younger, that have much more of a disconnection from nature than those who came before them. But they're smart, they're tech savvy, they're web-enabled, and they yearn to make a difference in the work that they do, but they don't have connections to places like the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and we want them to. So your efforts to bring young people out here, our efforts as part of the federal family to make sure that there are opportunities for them to play, to learn, to serve, and to work in the outdoors in places like the Smokies are going to be really important to our future. So as Pedro said, the National Park Service is about telling not just the natural history and story of our country, but our rich cultural history and the stories of all Americans. And so we will be working hard alongside you to make sure that the children of your community and other communities feel connected to this place. And I'll certainly be advocating in the Senator's office and others for funding for the programs that you value out here, and pledge to you that Pedro and his colleagues in the gray and green here in the National Park Service will continue to work alongside you to be that margin of excellence for the parks, for the park here for many years to come. So I look forward to making an announcement here in about half an hour about the timing of the collection center. I want to thank Bob Patterson and the Heritage Center for donating the land that will become the home for that facility that I think will bring a lot of visitors, researchers, people really interested in the history of this place, this whole region, to the Townsend side of the park, which should help with some of the local businesses, but more importantly, take care of these things for generations to come so that they don't deteriorate, because artifacts do deteriorate, and you've got some incredible stuff here. So, thank you very much for being here, and I'd like to open it up to you to tell me and my colleagues up here on stage anything that you'd like us to hear about this region, this park, and even the work of the Department of Interior broadly, or the federal government broadly. So, turn it over to you. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you. So as I'm sure you've been reminded over and over since you arrived, this region is home to the most visited national park, the most visited national park unit, Pisgah National Forest. If you take out ski visitation in Colorado, is the most visited national forest, yet Pisgah and Cherokee are two of the most fragmented national forest units. Land and Water Conservation Fund is the answer to that problem. Can you talk a little bit about efforts to protect it from further cuts and fire borrowing and other things that threaten that fund?
Absolutely. So happy to jump in, and Senator, if you want to jump in on this too, you're welcome to. So the President's going to be announcing his budget for 2015 tomorrow. So I learned very quickly not to upstage my boss with any premature announcements, so I'm not going to talk about 2015, except for what has already been announced, which is that in the President's budget there is a proposal to take the emergency part of wildland firefighting out of the day-to-day budget. So we can fight 99% of our fires in our regular suppression budget, but 1% of those fires go crazy on us, and they're really emergencies. They're like the tornado that hit Joplin, Missouri, or they're like a flood that hits the Mississippi River Valley. These are extraordinary events. The Rim Fire in Yellowstone Forest and Park last year would be an example of an extraordinary fire, and right now we have to take money to fight those fires out of our, first we do it out of the fire budget, so hazardous fuel removal that prevents fires from happening, or things that would enable us to do prescribed burns before they burn too hot under controlled circumstances. Those get subsumed by fighting the fire, and then if we don't have enough there, we go and nibble away again against every other part of the budget. It's particularly acute for the Forest Service, but it's also acute for us largely through BLM, Bureau of Indian Affairs, National Park Service, and Wildlife Service. So that there is a fix in the President's budget. Two of Senator Alexander's colleagues, Senator Crapo from Idaho and Senator Wyden from Oregon, also have legislation to do just this. So it takes that sort of extreme firefighting and takes it off budget into the emergency account without raising the emergency account more. It's all within the amount that FEMA would have had available. So that's one fix. Land and Water Conservation Fund, for those of you that don't know, so I'll do just a little bit of education for those who aren't tied into all the lingo. It was a piece of legislation passed 49 years ago under the Kennedy and Johnson administration that took up to $900 million of offshore oil and gas revenue as we were developing those resources, largely in the Gulf of Mexico, and put it aside to say there is going to be an impact, and don't we know that after the Deepwater Horizon spill, but there is going to be an impact to offshore oil and gas development, so we're going to mitigate that impact by putting money onshore to support land acquisition and conservation easements and local parks and so on to make public lands more accessible, more available to people onshore. And so LWCF, Land and Water Conservation Fund money, has gone to every single county across the United States. The intent was to fund it at $900 million. It has generally been funded at less than 50% of that amount. And it's been, even though the money set aside and comes in the Treasury, it hasn't been appropriated. So I'm getting really familiar with all these terms, but I didn't know a lot about them before 10 months ago. We want to see that appropriated into permanent funding. There was a 2-year course to get that done in the President's 2014 budget proposal, part discretionary in the appropriations, part mandatory. And the commitment of the administration to continue that path forward is very strong, but I won't be making any announcements on that until the President's budget gets announced tomorrow. But fully committed to doing that. And as the Senator could share with you, there's not going to be enough money to go around. And so you've got to make all kinds of difficult choices, just as Pedro and his colleagues at Great Smoky Mountain National Park are making difficult choices between what to support. So that will be the case for our appropriators as well. But feel like, for the first time, certainly last year was a disaster. It was budget cuts, sequestration, on top of several years of continuing resolutions, and very, very difficult for these federal government servants to do their job when they didn't know. I mean, they hire a seasonal, and then they say, no, never mind, and then they, okay, we'll have an intern, well, never mind, because you don't know what the budget is. Very, very difficult. We have now, thanks to the Murray-Ryan budget deal, a budget for 2014 and what looks like a pathway to regular order for 2015, and that will be very helpful. Senator, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, one thing I was, President Reagan asked me to be chairman of a thing called the President's Commission on Americans Outdoors in 1985 and 86, and one of our recommendations was to reiterate that we ought to fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund and do it from oil and gas revenues under the federal budget process, so you'd have to appropriate that every year, and establish it had been appropriated. The only time we made it automatic was in 2007 when Senator Domenici and I passed, as part of the energy bill, 1/8 of 1% of new revenues from the Gulf of Mexico, that automatically goes into the state side of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That's what we should do going forward. We should take new revenues from oil and gas drilling off the coast and put it into land and water up to the $900 million figure. I think the principle is right, as Sally said. If you have an environmental burden, you could create an environmental benefit. We do that with fish. You know, when the Corps of Engineers and TVA kill fish with their dams, they have to buy fish to mitigate that damage. And this is the same thing we should be doing here.
Other question? Yes, sir.
I have two concerns. One of those is that we continue to see funding cut for the National Park Service. It's affecting the Smokies, Blue Ridge Parkway. Do you see any optimism for those funds being increased so that we can hire people that are needed to protect these resources? That's one question. The other question is, can you shed any optimism, I hope, on the settlement of the North Shore Road to get those funds?
So on the second issue, I can't comment on it because I'm recused from a discussion on that, and that's because I was a board member of the National Parks Conservation Association. They took a position on it, so I will excuse myself from answering that second one, and if Pedro or the senator want to jump in on that, I'll let them do that. On the first one, you know, I say to my teammates across the Department of the Interior that we're operating with three big trends right now that are going to be with us. One is we're operating at a time of constrained resources. American people have said, we don't want to pay more taxes and we'd like more services. Well, you know, the reality is you get to a point where you can't do more with less, you have to do less with less. And we are past that point where, unfortunately, we are doing less with less. We have a large and growing maintenance backlog in our facilities. In the National Park Service, it's $11 billion, but if you go to Fish and Wildlife, National Forests, BLM lands, and you can even say roads and bridges and transportation, that we are still riding on an infrastructure that was built by people before us. Civilian Conservation Corps, I am so proud of the work that they did. We are bringing back in a significant way a Youth Conservation Corps ethic and ethos within our public lands. I'm doing it with support from the private sector because we don't have as much support from the public sector. So I think we need to think creatively in a time of constrained resources of how do we do the job that needs to be done on our public lands. I'd also say that your voices are very important. If you care about the Smokies, if you care about the national parks, the national forests, the quality of the roads, that this is a representative democracy, and your issues, the things that are important to you, will become the things that are important to Senator Alexander and Representative Duncan and your elected officials. And they need to hear from their constituents, and I'm sure the senator would say that so they know what your priorities are. But I said there's three things we're operating in. Constrained resources. We've got a massive generational transformation that's going on. So how do we bring the next generation of park rangers and wildlife biologists and trail crews into the parks at a time when budgets are tight? The first programs that get cut are the seasonal programs and the internships, and yet those are the things that put these careers on the map. And we have a lot of people that are going to be getting ready to retire over the coming 5 years. So that's the second trend. The third is climate change. And climate change is impacting our resources in a significant way. So you see it maybe obviously in Glacier National Park with melting glaciers, or Joshua Tree National Park where the Joshua trees are dying out. But here in the Smokies, it may feel more subtle, but it's things like spring is about 2 weeks earlier. The flowering plants that you're so known for in the Smokies require pollinators to continue to thrive, but the insects didn't get the memo that spring was 2 weeks earlier. They're coming out at a different time, and so you've got changes in your pollination cycle that are impacting things in the Smokies. It's understanding those things that actually make it more difficult to operate in constrained resources rather than less. So I can say that my colleagues in the Park Service and the other federal government agencies are trying to get creative about how we spend money. We're leaning more into friends groups to be the margin of survival, not just the margin of excellence. I'd like to go back to a time when we are more robustly supporting our public lands, but that is going to be a function of the population saying this is important to us and we're willing to pay for it. So I just would encourage you to bring your voices to the table on that. Senator?
On The Secretary is recused from talking about the North Shore Road and money owed to Swain County. I'm not. I don't represent North Carolina, but I can recognize an obligation when I see it. The federal government owes Swain County money. $4 million has been appropriated. It's hung up in a legislative, legal problem. I'm going to do my best to try to solve it and bring that discussion to an end. I'm not for building the road. I think everybody knows that. But the federal government owes Swain County the money, and it ought to pay it. I'm going to do my best to see that that happens. Second, and this is a longer discussion, and so I'm going to really abbreviate it so we can get back to the Secretary. But it's important for you to know that we care about the Smokies and the national parks. But the federal budget has two parts to it. One-third of it includes national parks, national defense, national laboratories like Oak Ridge, Pell Grants, highways, all things that are important to our country. That's 1/3 of the budget. It's going up at the rate of about 1 or 2% a year. The other 2/3 of the budget includes the so-called entitlement programs, like Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. It's going up 88% over the next 10 years. As it goes up, funding for the parks, the military, and national defense goes down. So if you really care about the national parks, you better get in the political argument over here about who's going to control spending on this side of the budget, and there's going to be nothing left on this side.
Yes.
From my stand over here, as we met, I'm Larry Sparks. I'm a native of Case Cove, and I'm here as a part of the Case Cove Preservation Association. We work in partnerships with the National Park Service, and they do an excellent job. However, we think that policy sometimes gets in our way. I want to offer you a deal that involves no money. We would like, and I heard you mention the stories being told to our Case Cove and our other areas. In particularly Case Cove, we would like our stories told more, and we do our level best in telling those stories. But one of the things that we would like to see happen is work with us to help identify some home sites over there by signage in some of our cemeteries. We still have cemeteries and our forefathers and mothers buried in areas where they're not identified. We would love to see that come to be. We would have a dialogue with you and work it down to whomever we could get to work with us to try to do this. I feel sure that our board would fund the signage that's necessary, so in a good partnership way, we would not be costing you any money, but we would like to have a voice and a spot at the table to talk about which sites we should identify in telling their stories. Many of our people paid lots of sacrifices. Some of our grandparents came over there, that were there when the park came in. They sold their land. One particular I'll mention is my great-grandfather, as is Judy Johns. Noah Birchfield and Sarah Brown Birchfield sold 220 acres to the park for $9,000. They put the money in the bank. The banks went broke. So they left the last 2 or 3 years of their life standing and facing in the front yard that they didn't own. I tell you this to bring up the point that they had a huge sacrifice. And we like to tell their story by at least putting their name on the property, over the property. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and I really appreciate your comment, Larry. I will tell you, I never let a deal pass, especially a deal that has nothing to do with money. So we have to talk. talking about things that really and honestly, sincerely resonate with me. I spoke a little bit ago about the importance that I place personally as a superintendent in the people story aspect of the work that we do. So let's talk. I can tell that there's some space for us to work with each other together. Let's do it, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you pointed out that with our children growing up in concrete and digital environments, that it's really important for them to connect with nature. Park Service has several really nice environmental education centers throughout the country, one of the best right here at Tremont. I'd like to hear what you think about the future of environmental education, and particularly in the national parks. And then as an aside, as the former Deputy Chief of the National Forest Service, I really appreciate this notion of separating the fire funds from appropriations.
Terrific. Thank you for your comments. Well, I am a firm believer in the classrooms that have no walls. I've been to the Tremont Center on one of my visits over the last 5 years. It's a pretty extraordinary center. I will tell you that it's the only place I've been, and this is not, it's kind of not far from the parking lot. On a little trail I saw one of those writhing balls of snakes. The Park Service people said, don't get too close to that. Are they being copperheads? I'm not sure, but it was certainly got my attention. I believe that kids learn by doing. I learned by doing. As a child, the most memorable experiences I had, probably a lot of it on national forest land, being from the Pacific Northwest, but also on a little bit of national park land through Mount Rainier and so on. I went on 2-week trips into the outdoors that were led by a woman named Mrs. Black, and she was a powerful influence on my childhood. Started at age 9, go camping for 2 weeks with a group of probably a dozen kids, and we always had 2 graduate students with us from the University of Washington, and they dipped us into their topics of study. Botany and trees of the Pacific Northwest. And I could name all the scientific names of trees from the Pacific Northwest at that time and identify all of them. I can still identify all of them, but other than pseudo-menzii, which is the Douglas fir, I've forgotten the rest of it. But it was meteorology, it was archaeology, it was marine biology. I hiked across the Olympic Peninsula with a group of kids, same group basically at 12 years old. Those things shaped who I am today. That trip in 1977 that I talked about, the only summer I took off college, I put 15,000 miles on my Fiat, and you knew Fiat's from the 70s. It's amazing that I made it. But I visited national parks and public land sites all across the country, from Seattle all the way down to Florida and up the East Coast, and I came back looking at similar sites in Canada. These things get into your blood, and yet we've got kids who are very disconnected from nature. Kaiser Family Foundation did a study in 2002 that children could name more Pokemon characters than wildlife species. Huge problem. Rich Louv, who's a friend of mine, has become a friend of mine, author of Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. Many of you know the book. Did, I think, a real service to young people in this country by identifying nature deficit disorder, by doing a lot of research behind it, and then highlighting that in a reasonably readable way. So we could think about that. And in my former day job at REI, it was a real focus of ours to connect children with nature. I have a significant initiative at the Department of the Interior, Youth Initiative, which is, first starts with play, just encouraging our young people to play on our public lands, to get out and enjoy themselves, and do it in an unstructured way, where adults aren't telling them what to do all the time. You got a great opportunity to do that for the kids in this community here. We're partnering with cities around the country, largely through the National Park Service, to put a lot more opportunities for kids to play on the radar. I've was meeting with Mayor Emanuel in Chicago here recently. We've got assets around the interior, notably Fish and Wildlife Refuges. I was in one just outside of Minneapolis that's welcoming kids out there to play. But then there's the Learn, which is environmental learning. We want 10 million young people coming through environmental education, doing environmental education on our public lands every year. So I was just talking with some of the Park Service folks in the park earlier this morning. Here's the downside number, but also gives you an idea of how well the park here is generally doing. That shutdown that we had, the 3-week unfortunate, wasteful government shutdown, precluded 3,000 school children who had planned trips to do environmental education here from coming on their field trips. That's just that short period of time, 3 weeks. 3,000 kids would have had an opportunity to come into the Smokies. So there's play, there's learn. Environmental education is critical to that. There's serve, which is volunteer stewardship. The Friends of the Smokies. The kind of fundraising you do, but also friend-raising that gets volunteers to come out and work with young people who are working, which is the last component. Youth Conservation Corps, the Civilian Conservation Corps 2.0, 21st century Conservation Service Corps, whatever you want to call it, we're bringing that back in a significant way, raising private money to do it. So it's kind of a continuum, is the way we envision it. We'll be keeping track of how well we do. We will be working with cities to partner with them. Sometimes we may have an asset and we can welcome kids out to that asset. A place like Chicago, we've got very few assets, wildlife refuges and national parks, but we've got expertise and we've got people, wildlife biologists, urban planners, all kinds of people that can maybe help the city engage more young people. So that's absolutely a focus of ours, and we can't do enough of it as far as I'm concerned. Best classroom are the one with no walls, and that's what sticks with kids. It's not just sitting inside and reading a book. And you do have a spectacular facility out here in Fremont. It's a great illustration. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your work for the Forest Service as well.
Thanks.
We work very closely with the Forest Service and very much aligned. Okay, there, and then we'll go to you.
As a secretary, I'm probably one of the oldest people here today. And I can say things, therefore I found out when I get older that a lot of people can't say. And I want to say to you that you probably don't have any you couldn't understand really how much it means to us to have you here. As a secretary, we've never felt a lot of love for the secretary. Period. And that's because there's so much influence out west, so we understand that. And it just means, I can't tell you how much it means to have us here. I've almost been president of everyone that's been here, and it's not been too many. So you're a very important person. The only thing else I would like to say is that, we're in this area of East Tennessee, we're just so important tied on access, getting in and out, highway access. And one of the projects that's been started for years, and we understand the delays. There's no question about it. We understand the competition for the money. We understand that by Lamar more than anybody else. But the Foothills Parkway is still, in our opinion, a very, very important project that will add an awful lot and will add millions of people that are able to enjoy the park more when we can finally get that done. So we just make an underscore of that. And thank you so much for just coming down here. It means an awful lot to us, because we know how important it is for you to spend your time to come to this Smokies.
Thank you very much. Well, it didn't take a lot of arm twisting to get me out of Washington, D.C. and into the mountains of Tennessee, let me tell you. I do appreciate it. And on the Foothills Road, I don't know if Pedro or Senator, you want to comment on that? I know it's there. I know where it goes to. The Senator showed me on a relief map yesterday, but I'm not as fully versed on its future.
I may. I'll say that, that parkway, and by the way, my native language is Spanish, and I was telling the secretary this yesterday, learning English in school, I always wondered why we drive on the parkway and park in the driveway. I'll leave that thought with you. We were both scratching our heads, we still couldn't come up with the answer. But this is the only congressionally designated parkway that has not been completed. It is important to the National Park Service for us to complete this. And what we're focusing right now is the fact that we have the missing link. We've been working on it. I consider it a mother of marvel. I don't know how engineers figured out how to build this bridging that is being built up there, and I look forward to that being completed come 2016, very beginning of 2017. We were trying to marry that with the centennial of the National Park Service. Staff is giving me faces in the back of the room, but the point is that we're moving in that direction, and we know that there's funding that we still need, but we have a lot of friends that support us here, so we're confident that someday we're all going to be able to drive that parkway sooner than later and enjoy the view from that beautiful, beautiful scenery that you see up there of the Smokies. Anything else?
No, it's the goal was 2016. That was the last goal. And I've strongly supported it, at least to get it to the Wears Valley, get to the Wears Valley Road. It's expensive, difficult to build. If we have another federal transportation highway bill, hopefully we can get some money from that into this. I mean, roads really ought to be paid for by user fees and not taken from other things. But it's a priority. We've tried to build it. I think the state gave the property to the federal government about 1940. So the state's had it right away for a long time. So it's top of my list. I'll do my best.
I've been working down in Florida, as Secretary knows, on Everglades restoration, and when I got here, and Alan, who's in the back of the room, our facility manager, doing incredible work with this project, showed me that site. I immediately, when we got back to the office, called my counterpart in Everglades National Park, and I said, Dan, I know where the rest of the money's going to. It's here. So, we don't get a lot of money for construction in the National Park Service. We're blessed that a lot of the money is going to Great Smokies and Everglades National Park.
One of the park's projects has been the removal of non-native species, and we certainly support that on things like kudzu and privet. But at times in different parts of the national park, things like daffodils have been removed because they're non-native that our great-grandmothers planted. Is there a chance that we could have a little bit more sensitivity on issues like that that affected the pioneer families and places where you could find their home sites? We do truly appreciate your time with us today. Thank you.
Thanks. Pedro, I'm going to turn daffodils over to you. I can talk about the non-natives and the invasives that we struggle with. I don't know about the daffodil issue.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I just got here a month and a half ago, and I still need to learn about that issue, but feel free to contact me. We've got a lot of smart people back at the shop that are working on very, very difficult issues, and I agree that.
Let me suggest something. You know, maybe you could think of the daffodils like you think of some of the old structures that you have in the park, because what they often represent is where the structures were, and it's kind of fun. I mean, ever since I was a little boy, I remember going into the park and my mother pointing out to me, there was a log cabin there, or there was a church there. There would have been something there because you can see the daffodils coming up in the spring. So we need to get the hogs and kudzu out. But I want to think about the daffodils just as you think about the structures, because it's back there, evidence of the structures that are gone.
Thank you. I did not know that.
I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and a lot of our Park Service colleagues are here and are listening as well. I will say that invasive species, which is not your question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. They're an enormous problem across the landscapes everywhere. Kudzu, certainly, you're very familiar with the woolly adelgid that's killed. Your hemlocks is an invasive. Hogs that Senator mentioned, which actually are wreaking havoc on ecosystems all over the country. It's very hard to keep up. You really can't keep up. So you pretty much have to pick and choose the areas you want to preserve and make sure that you're taking good care of them. Because you can't do them all. You've got big problems in the West with what comes in behind a wildland fire and how hot the fires are burning, and they're sterilizing the soils, and stuff that comes back is not what you want to begin with. So it's a huge issue, but it would seem to me that we prioritize woolly adelgids over daffodils. So I'm sure everybody's
You can also get a lot of volunteers around here to shoot hogs.
I understand. Okay, I think we are about to move into the press availability part of this. I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, for sharing your ideas, for the descendants of the folks in the park, for the original inhabitants of this area long before settlers came. Chief, thank you for bringing your stories, your history, your culture your warmth to me and to the Senator, to Pedro, to Bob. We look forward to making sure that the stories of the people that were here and the artifacts that represent your people are well preserved in this collections facility. We hope that many more people beyond the 9.8 or 9.7, excuse me, I gotta keep my numbers straight, 9.7 million people that visited you just a couple years ago, and I know the numbers keep going up, are driving so much of the economic activity of this area, and taking good care of this resource that you all care so deeply about is going to keep them coming back. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, for your warm welcome, and I won't be a stranger to the Great Smokies. Thanks very much.